A CEO of a large American investment company, many people are moving money out of China. CCP experts criticize 300 million migrant workers for not investing in real estate development. Fitch to revoke all country garden service ratings next month. Infrastructure spending may not save China's economy this time. 3 months after the flood, Xi Jinping's speech left the entire internet dumbfounded. It's all covered in today's China Truths. A CEO of a large American investment company, many people are moving money out of China. The uncertain investment climate in China has discouraged many from getting involved. Beyond the financial implications, numerous individuals are actively looking to move their funds out of the country. Afsaneh Beschloss, the founder and CEO of Rock Creek Group, a Washington-based investment firm, revealed during an interview with Bloomberg on Saturday, November 11, that many are pulling their investments out of China. She further explained, in truth, many are silent publicly because they plan to establish new factories elsewhere before shifting their operations from China. These ongoing events signal the initial steps to reduce the inflow of external funds into China. Challenges persist regarding China's aging population, substantial real estate loans, and the prevailing preference for saving rather than spending. Beschloss also highlighted that during Janet Yellen's meeting with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, emphasis was placed on the considerable subsidies provided by the Chinese government to industries. A few years ago, investing in a private Chinese company might have led investors to anticipate returns in 10 years or later. However, the present business climate under Xi Jinping's administration has made investors increasingly uneasy. Even successful domestic investors, such as tech or venture capitalists, are now redirecting their investments to Chinese companies overseas. This adjustment stems from their fear of replicating the fate of Alibaba's founder, Jack Ma, in case of excessive success. Reuters' analysis of China's preliminary balance of payments data revealed $11.8 billion third-quarter deficit in foreign direct investment, FDI. This quarter marks the first recorded deficit for the Chinese authorities since data collection began in 1998. Geopolitical tensions have driven Western businesses to de-risk by either ceasing investments in China or repatriating profits from their Chinese operations. This climate has also led international companies to reconsider their supply chains and pause investments in China. The Wall Street Journal reported that over 6 consecutive quarters, foreign investors repatriated over $160 billion in profits from China by the year's end. Economists and corporate leaders attribute various factors to this foreign profit outflow. They cite the expanding gap between U.S. and Chinese interest rates, making Western bond yields more appealing. As the Federal Reserve and many central banks increased rates to tackle high inflation, China's prolonged real estate market slump prompted the People's Bank of China to lower rates multiple times. CCP experts criticize 300 million migrant workers for not investing in real estate development. Recently, information circulated on China's social media platform, Weibo, drew significant criticism. This information was conveyed by a senior official from the former Central Financial Leadership Group office of the CCP, suggesting that 300 million migrant workers in China have yet to purchase a house, hinting at the untapped development potential in the nation's real estate industry. The relay of this information was conducted by a Weibo account under the name Lu Guobing. The senior official referenced is Dr. Yang Weimin. During the 2023 Digital Economy Forum on May 22 in Wuhan, Dr. Yang delivered a keynote speech. He highlighted that the peak of China's residential housing market hasn't been reached yet, pointing to the considerable potential. Dr. Yang emphasized that despite numerous vacant homes, there is a substantial opportunity to address the housing needs of 300 million people, primarily migrant workers. Dr. Yang advocated for encouraging migrant workers to invest in housing, underscoring the role it plays in supporting urbanization, city development, and rejuvenation. Additionally, he suggested that authorities offer more favorable policies and financial support to assist migrant workers in homeownership. Initially, these comments from Dr. Yang Weimin, as reported by the Chinese media outlet Daily Economic News, didn't attract much public attention. However, when these thoughts were amplified by a well-known Weibo influencer, they sparked an intense debate among Chinese internet users. Some felt that there is no shortage of so-called experts in China who confidently express views detached from reality. Others humorously speculated that property prices reaching 500 yuan per square meter would be the point when migrant workers could finally afford commercial homes. Some sarcastically commented that with 1.4 billion people lacking private planes, there seems to be ample room for growth in the aircraft manufacturing industry. An analysis by an account called Property Market New Perspective critiqued Yang Weimin's statement for being disconnected from the real situation in China. The article examined several facets. Official statistics from 2022 revealed that China saw only 6.46 million new urban residents, merely 60% of the expected figures, signaling a significant slowdown in rural to urban migration. It's highlighted that the 300 million migrant workers' lack of homeownership isn't due to preference but financial constraints. Assuming there's demand for another 300 million properties is seen as either ignorant or intentional. Even if these workers moved to urban areas, they wouldn't be able to afford available homes. The piece stressed the economic reality, indicating that it would take the average Chinese migrant worker 20 years, without spending, to afford a 100 square meter house. The article also emphasized that 600 million people in the country earn less than 1,000 yuan monthly, underscoring the pressing economic disparities. Lastly, the article criticized the idea of relying on 300 million migrant workers to sustain the real estate industry without addressing fundamental employment, healthcare, and retirement systems. This strategy could lead to a rise in unemployed urban residents. Fitch to revoke all Country Garden service ratings next month. On November 13, the international credit rating agency Fitch Ratings announced the withdrawal of all ratings for China's Country Garden Services Holdings, abbreviated to Country Garden Service, due to commercial reasons. The planned withdrawal of the ratings is set for December 12. Country Garden Service Holdings Ltd specializes in various property management services and is an affiliate of the Chinese real estate giant Country Garden Holdings Ltd, abbreviated to Country Garden. Country Garden has faced financial distress this year due to severe liquidity shortages, resulting in recent debt defaults. The company is currently focusing on a large-scale debt restructuring. As early as late August of this year, Fitch had downgraded Country Garden Services' credit rating from BBB to BB+ and placed the company's rating under negative observation. At that time, Fitch pointed out that the rising liquidity pressure on Country Garden might negatively impact the growth, brand reputation, profitability, and financing channels of Country Garden Service, posing potential risks to its liquidity, operational fund management, and financial policies. Fitch also analyzed that Country Garden Services trade accounts receivable turnover days increased from around 60 days in 2019 to over 130 days in 2022. Based on this trend, Fitch estimates an increase in Country Garden Services operational funds in 2023. Simultaneously, the return of most revenue from Country Garden might become challenging from the second half of 2023. In summary, the weakening of Country Garden Services' brand reputation and bargaining power, combined with the potential worsening of financial flexibility, has led Fitch to downgrade the company's rating and place it under negative observation. Infrastructure spending may not save China's economy this time. If, at this early stage, it is impossible to tell if the latest infrastructure initiative will create an economic payoff, it is nonetheless a good bet that the effort is too small to meet the needs of China's heavily beleaguered economy. This is the argument in the article, Is More Infrastructure What China Needs?, published November 10, written by Mr. Milton Ezrati, a chief economist for Vested, a New York-based communications firm. According to Mr. Ezrati, China's leadership has finally awakened to the fact that its economy needs more help. With less than great imagination, Beijing has turned to its default response, infrastructure spending. At its recent Central Finance Work Conference, the Chinese regime announced that it had authorized 1 trillion yuan, $137 billion, in new bond issues to finance spending on projects, mainly to help flood-damaged regions. Though such spending has worked in the past to spur growth in China's economy, it is far from apparent that, in the present circumstances, this effort will do the job. One critical reason to doubt the efficacy of Beijing's policy is how, in more recent years, infrastructure spending has failed to have the desired economic effect. This failure to get a significant economic payoff from past spending is clearly evident in the precarious finances of provincial and local governments. In the past, Beijing's infrastructure projects have largely burdened provincial and local finances. Beijing has authorized borrowing to finance its infrastructure plans through what are called local government financing vehicles, LGFVs. Still, the provincial and local governments have assumed the financial obligations. Because recent such efforts have failed to create the desired economic payoff, these local governments now face huge debt overhangs that they are struggling to manage, so burdensome in some cases that these state entities are having trouble providing basic services for their populations. Indeed, some local governments have already resorted to using new LGFVs to pay off debts left from past infrastructure efforts. Beijing has noted the financial plight of local governments and, for the first time in a long time, has decided to take the debt for this latest infrastructure effort onto its own balance sheet. This gesture may relieve the financial burdens on local governments or at least not worsen them. Still, the failure of past such efforts to win the needed economic payoff raises the question of whether this latest round of infrastructure spending will have any better results. Even if this new spending does create an economic payoff, it is far from certain that it will be sufficient to get the Chinese economy moving. After all, the budgeted amount is less than 1% of China's $18 trillion economy. To have the desired effect, the new spending initiative will not only have to move a giant economy but also overcome the enormous economic drag imposed by China's severe financial woes. As already mentioned, local governments are struggling. According to Li Daoque, former advisor to the People's Bank of China, PBOC, and a professor at Tsinghua University, their accumulated debts have grown to 64 trillion yuan, mostly from past infrastructure financing. That is more than half the size of China's gross domestic product, GDP. On top of this burden, China's financial system must also deal with the enormous failures of residential property developers, Evergrande and Country Garden most prominently but far from alone. Still, more strain on China's financial institutions has emerged from the refusal of Chinese households to pay off mortgage debts they incurred on apartments pre-bought from now-failed developers. All these financial strains could not help but have ill effects on China's economy, but there is more. The decline in property values accompanying these collapses has so affected household wealth that the economy also suffers from the reluctance of Chinese households to consume. In an oblique recognition of the dire nature of these financial strains, Beijing also announced at the Central Finance Work Conference that it aims to optimize the debt structure for central and local governments. Presumably, the decision to finance this latest infrastructure spending with central government treasury bonds is part of that optimization. But aside from this one step, Beijing offered little idea of what it means by this phrase. The lack of specificity inevitably leaves the sense that Beijing has no notion of what other steps it needs to take. If, at this early stage, it is impossible to tell if this latest infrastructure initiative will create an economic payoff, it is nonetheless a good bet that the effort is too small to meet the needs of China's heavily beleaguered economy. Even in the unlikely event that this effort has a huge payoff, the economy seems set to struggle into 2024. 3 months after the flood, Xi Jinping's speech left the entire internet dumbfounded. It's been over 3 months since the floods ravaged Beijing and Hebei in August. The CCP leader, Xi Jinping, recently visited the affected regions, sparking a stir with some startling statements. In more detail, according to Xinhua News Agency, the official Chinese media, Xi Jinping visited Mentugo district in Beijing and Zhuizhou city in Baoding, Hebei, both severely affected by the disaster. He extended condolences to the affected people and oversaw post-disaster recovery and reconstruction efforts. Xi Jinping mentioned, "Throughout that period, I was deeply concerned about the disaster every day, guiding relief efforts, and constantly considering the situation of the disaster-affected areas and the people." The article closes with a quote from Xi Jinping: "I hope the villagers can rely on their own efforts, work diligently, and use their hardworking hands to expedite recovery, promote reconstruction, and progress rural revitalization." It appears that even with Xi Jinping's arrival, villagers still must rely on their own efforts and hard work without expecting external aid. The Xinhua report also emotionally recalled several instances of Xi Jinping's visits to disaster areas over the years. As we've previously mentioned, the floods in Hebei, especially in Zhuizhou, Baoding, and Bazhou, have generated considerable skepticism as artificially orchestrated actions to release water, safeguarding Beijing and the Xiongnu area, personally managed by Xi Jinping. Some areas are reported to have covertly breached embankments at night to avoid attention, causing immediate flooding downstream, catching locals off guard. In some cases, individuals recognized this early and tried to fortify the embankments but were suppressed by authorities. Official reports stated 29 deaths and 16 missing individuals in Hebei due to the disaster, but the public doubts these figures. Netizens have disclosed troubling information. A village head disclosed that over 20 bodies remained in their village cowshed, implying over 20 casualties within that community. Although many of these calamities are human-caused, authorities attribute them to natural occurrences. State media CCTV reported large-scale protests by Bazhou residents due to heavy rainfall causing flooding. Authorities deployed numerous police, who used pepper spray and physically assaulted people, causing injuries. Following the flood, authorities delayed assessing damage in the homes of affected individuals, leaving victims hesitant to clear debris, concerned about preserving evidence, causing a stench and leaving them with nowhere to go. On November 12, a video emerged of an elderly man on a bicycle being stopped and asked, "Can you sum up an ordinary person's life in a sentence?" After pondering, the man replied, "In prosperous times, they're like cattle and horses, but in chaotic times, they're just cannon fodder." Netizens commended this, appreciating the insight and precision in the response. Some comments extended the analogy: "In good times, they're leeks, in bad times, they're ants, or born with plans, die at random." Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. If you find the information helpful, please share this video with a friend to watch together. This will be a great source of motivation for our team to produce more and more quality and reliable videos. And also don't forget to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths. Thank you for tuning in.